Hello, this is Father Mark speaking to my parishioners about day number 21 of the Bible in a Year, and we're looking at Genesis chapters 39 and 40. And here we're once again going to take up the story of Joseph. We last left our hero at the bottom of a pit, and then his brother Judah had the idea of selling him for pieces of silver. He's a kind of image of Judas who sold Christ and betrayed him, so Joseph was sold to slave traders who brought him down to Egypt, and now we take up the story again, and turns out that things start going well for Joseph right away, and for the rest of the whole book of Genesis, we're going to hear this long story, about 13 chapters of this whole huge chunk of the Bible is dedicated to Joseph, the patriarch, and it's interesting. And why is that? Why so much of the Bible dedicated to one of these patriarchs of the Old Testament? Well, it's because it's about Jesus Christ. We who are Christians and Catholics, we know, unfortunately, the Jewish people who only have the Old Testament, they don't recognize, and they can't maybe explain why a huge part of the Bible is dedicated to Joseph, but we know that he's very symbolic. I'll just say a couple things about Joseph, and that is, first of all, he's different from the rest of the patriarchs. They're all, as Father Michael Schmitz says, are broken. They're all kind of sinful. They're not perfect. They have their faults and their weaknesses, and gradually they might get more mature later on, but they have their sinfulness. But not Joseph. Joseph, very interesting. He is, from the beginning, innocent, shrewd, smart, good-looking, handsome, as it says in verse number 6. He's just this perfect kind of person. And we would explain that, of course, by saying that he's a type of Christ. He's a foreshadowing of Jesus Christ. And so he really is unique in the Old Testament. And another thing we see is that there's also a lot of similarities to Joseph, the husband of Mary. We know that St. Joseph also had dreams, and St. Joseph was a righteous man and pure and chaste and did not take sexual advantage. So those are the things we're seeing in Joseph the patriarch. And so St. Joseph is, of course, pure and innocent, the greatest of saints. And so we can certainly understand as Catholics why St. Joseph Joseph the Patriarch, is really kind of put on a pedestal. He's just so good. And typically in the Old Testament, the chosen people get prosperity. And so it starts to happen to Joseph right away. He goes down to Egypt, and he's a slave. He's sold into slavery, but he's sold to an officer of Pharaoh, Potiphar, and Potiphar puts him in charge of everything. He quickly rises to the top of the heap. He's kind of Potiphar made him master of everything and put him in charge of everything. And as it keeps repeating, Joseph found favor in his sight, and the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake, and just prosperity and blessing upon blessing. And that is because, God blesses us, his chosen people, doesn't he? God does. But then there's sometimes persecution. And so we know that Potiphar's wife tries to seduce him, and he resists. He remains chaste. He runs out of the house naked because she grabs his robe, and he runs away, and he leaves everything behind, including his job, because she accused him of trying to rape her, and And so Potiphar put him in prison. Maybe Potiphar didn't really believe his wife completely, because normally a slave who was accused of raping the wife of a nobleman would have been executed, of course. But he was only put in prison, so that was kind of a mild punishment considering. And but there we have Joseph in the prison, and then Joseph puts his dream interpreting skills to use one more time and is able to get out of prison eventually that way, as we will see. So these are the adventures of our dear Joseph, and we're going to see that the plot thickens as it goes on, and more we're going to see that it's a beautiful, beautiful, long allegory of what happens to Jesus Christ, who is betrayed and put in prison, who suffers, but then becomes king and forgives us, forgives his brothers, and gives blessings and nourishment and bread to the world.